What's up, everyone, and welcome to Brian Sports Hub. If you are new here, my name is Brian. I am the host of this podcast. I'm so excited you're able to join me today for this episode. And really, all I'm going to do is just recap all the sporting events that have happened in like the last 7 to 10 days, roughly, because there's been a lot that has gone on. So I'm going to start off with the NHL, National Hockey League. They just finished up their Stanley Cup. It was their championship series. And it just ended last Monday, June 24th. The series was between the Florida Panthers and the Edmonton Oilers. The series ended up going to a game 7, which a lot of people did not see happening after the Panthers 3-0 start in the series. They won the first 3 games kind of overwhelmingly. Maybe not the score showed it, but the play did if you watch the games. And so a lot of people are thinking it's going to be over in 4 games, 5 games at max. But on the back of Connor McDavid, the Edmonton Oilers were able to fight back, tie the series to 3 games apiece, and then took it to Game 7, which was played back in Florida. The game lived up to the hype, especially Game 7. It lived up to it. And in the end, Florida Panthers were able to go home victorious with a 2-1 victory in Game 7. Very exciting series. And Connor McDavid, this is kind of unusual just because typically players on the losing team historically don't get it as often as players on the winning team. But Connor McDavid, the center for the Edmonton Oilers, he ended up winning the Conn Smythe Award or trophy, which is the NHL's MVP of the entire playoff season. So like the NFL and the NBA, they give it for the final series specifically or the Super Bowl specifically. The NHL does the playoff season entirely. So it's a little different than other sports. But Connor McDavid did take that honor home, but he did not take home the NHL regular season MVP. That award, which is called the Hart Memorial Trophy, was given to Nathan MacKinnon, the center for the Colorado Avalanche. So that was a big night. That was announced, I believe, Wednesday, June 27th, June 28th. It was somewhere around that time frame. Leading up, which that was kind of like the bridge between the Stanley Cup series and the draft. So the Stanley Cup happened Monday, June 24th. They were announcing awards throughout until June 28th when the draft took place. So the NHL does not keep their fans waiting long for hope for the next season. I mean, it's like, championship ends, draft right away begins. So I'm just going to recap a little bit of the top 5 picks. Just kind of name who were the picks, like who were the players, where did they come from, their position, and then who selected them. So I'm going to start off with pick number 1. This was San Jose Sharks. They had the selection. They selected Macklin Celebrini, a center out of Boston University. He was kind of the unanimous number 1. I do remember reading a lot about that. There was really no debate. It kind of started, pick 2 was when the draft really started. But nonetheless, he was selected number 1 like everyone predicted. So number 2, that pick was owned by the Chicago Blackhawks. And they selected, and I apologize if I butcher any of these names, but the Chicago Blackhawks ended up selecting Artyom Ivshanov. I don't exactly know how to pronounce it, like I said. He's a defenseman out of Michigan State. They selected him 2nd overall. And then 3rd overall, and I love this pick when I watched it because the player's reaction to being selected was like so genuine and unique. He had a shocked face. He may have said a few choice words, but it was all in shock and like enjoyment just because he wasn't expecting it. The player was Beckett Sinecki. He was a right wing out of Oshawa, and he was selected by the Anaheim Ducks with the 3rd overall pick. I loved watching the video of him getting selected because he just like his jaw dropped and he's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. And he hugs his parents and he walks down the stairs and goes to the stage. So it was a really cool moment to watch. 4th overall, that pick was owned by the Columbus Blue Jackets, and they ended up selecting Caden Lindstrom, a center out of Medicine Hat. I believe that's the town. That's what ESPN had posted was the town. And then 5th overall, to round up top 5, was Ivan Demidov, a right wing out of SKA, St. Petersburg Jr., and he was selected by Montreal Canadiens, 5th overall. So that kind of rounded up the top 5, and that kind of rounds up all the NHL news in this last week. So I'm going to move on over to the WNBA. They ended up having, really the 2 things I'm highlighting are both records, whether it's extended records or broken records. But they did have a nice little week of kind of getting popularity and record-breaking performances. So I'm going to start off with Angel Reese. She's been in the news recently, or I guess not too recent, But basically, she's been in the news for other stuff that I'm sure if you've even had an ear close or your eyes close to the sports world, you probably would have known why she's in there. But this time, she got in the news for a whole different reason. She ended up breaking Candace Parker's record for the most consecutive games recording a double-double in one season. There's a lot of information. Basically, a double-double, for those that may not know in basketball terms, is when a player records double-digit statistics in two categories. So it could be 10 points, 12 rebounds. It could be 10 points, 11 assists. It could be 20 points and 10 steals, and so forth. So it's as long as the player gets double statistics in two different categories, it counts as a double-double. And if it's in three categories, triple-double, and then obviously quadruple doubles in four categories, and obviously so on. So Angel Reese broke the record. She had her 10th performance in a row, 10th game in a row, where she recorded a double-double, and that ended up breaking Candace Parker's previous record of 9 for all time in the WNBA. This is not a rookie record. This is an all-time player record, and Angel Reese ended up breaking it in her rookie year. And she finished it off with, actually, it was a pretty good performance. It was 10 points and 16 rebounds was her double-double, and she did it against the Minnesota Lynx. But sadly, the effort did not grant them a win, like the Chicago Sky a win against the Lynx. The Lynx still won 79-70. But Angel Reese did break a record, which was really good for the sport and really good just for Angel Reese herself, as you know, all of her recent media attention. So the second record I want to bring up, this one was not broken. This was extended, and it's actually very impressive when you look into the list. Diana Taurasi, I believe I'm pronouncing that right. Diana Taurasi, a legend in the WNBA. I know her name. I just never really knew how to pronounce it, so I'm hoping I pronounce it correctly. She extended her record for most games where she's made 5 or more threes in a career. So she now hit, I believe this was like Friday, maybe Saturday, so June 29th, roughly, June 28th. She ended up getting her 80th career game where she scored at least or made at least 5 threes in that game. And this extends her streak or her lead above second place to 50 games. I don't want to repeat that again. So basically, Diana has 80 games where she's made a career, or 80 games in her career where she's made at least 5 threes in a game. The next highest is a retired player named Katie Smith, who is now the lead assistant head coach for the Minnesota Lynx. And Katie Smith's in second place with 30 games in a career. That is just ridiculous in any sport you look at, in any record you look at, to have a margin of 50 games. I just think that's phenomenal. And it's just insane to look at. But nonetheless, that wraps up the WNBA news I wanted to share with you guys. So I'm going to jump on over to the NCAA Baseball Championship. This took place, ironically enough, they do a 3-game series, and Game 3 ended up taking place just about the exact same time that Game 7 took place for the NHL. So big night last Monday, June 24th, for just championship series for college baseball and National Hockey League. So really big night. But Tennessee, the matchup was set. It was set, I guess, back on June, it was, I think, the Friday before it was set or something like that, or the Thursday before, so like June 20th, roughly. Tennessee, the number 1 team in the nation, was going to be taking on the number 3 team in the nation, Texas A&M, in a 3-game series to decide who's going to take home the championship trophy. And it started out hot because a lot of people had Tennessee winning. Could it be 2 games? Could it be 3 games? We don't know. So they were like, all right, Game 1 is going to go to Tennessee. They are the home team, so they have that little advantage of having the bottom of the 9th inning. They're batting bottom of the inning, so they can make a comeback if needed in the bottom of the 9th. But shockingly, I think to everyone, somewhat, I guess, because you can't, a number 3 team taking down a number 1 team in a game, it's not overly shocking, but it's still shocking. And Texas A&M took that Game 1. They won 9-5. They beat Tennessee, putting all the pressure on Tennessee to step up in Game 2, because if they don't, it's going to be a clean sweep, 2-0 sweep of the number 1 team in the nation. So they put Tennessee up against their backs. They're like, all right, let's see what you got, because we just gave you what we have, and we're not ready to back down. But Tennessee came back with a vengeance, or I wouldn't say vengeance. They came back with a little bit of firepower. They ended up winning the second game 4-1. So now you're going into Game 3 on Monday night. Tennessee, Texas A&M, the series is 1-1. This is the game to decide who's taking home this trophy. And Tennessee, now they did end up winning 6-5, but it was not without a scare. They're up 6-1 going into the top of the eighth. Texas A&M scores 2 runs. It's 6-3. They get the outs. They go down to the bottom of the eighth. Tennessee's held scoreless, so they get back up to the top of the ninth. Last inning, last chance for Texas A&M. They score 1 run. Now they're 2 outs. There's a batter up, obviously, at the plate facing. He's on a 0-2 count, and there's a runner on third, and the score is 6-4 in favor of Tennessee. And Texas A&M is up batting. The pitcher for Tennessee, and this is a wild 2-pitch sequence, which is why I'm kind of breaking it down. The pitcher for Tennessee throws a wild ball, like way off, above the catcher's head, out wide, hits the brick backstop that's like 10 feet behind the plate. And the Texas A&M runner from third comes in, scores, makes it a 1-run game. Now the count's 1-2. Pitcher just made a huge mistake in the game. You have 2 outs. You just need 1 more strike. And Tennessee's pitcher throws a nasty pitch. I believe it was a slider. Could have been a sweeper, but I believe it was a slider. Curves away from the batter or slides away from the batter. Batter swings, misses. Tennessee wins the championship, which ended up being, which I found out later, was their first ever World Series championship in their entire school's history, which is it's crazy to think that an SEC school, especially of Tennessee's caliber, who's been in the World Series multiple times, especially recently, finally got their first ever championship. And looking more into that, I found out that the last time they were even in the World Series championship was back in 1951 when they lost to Oklahoma in the World Series championship. So I thought that was crazy to think Tennessee's only been twice, and they're now 1-2. They won their first one. So congratulations, Tennessee, and that wrapped up the NCAA baseball championship on Monday. So now we're moving on to the PGA Tour, and this took place June 28th to June 30th. I believe those are the correct dates. And this was the Rocket Mortgage Classic at the Detroit Golf Club. Now, I'm just going to name off 2 players that I really wanted to point out. The first one's going to be the winner. Obviously, you want to point out the winner. Australian golfer Cam Davis won his second ever Rocket Mortgage Classic this weekend. I believe it was Sunday. He won with a score of -18. If you don't know how golf is scored, they have a par. And if you hear someone say -2 or +4 or so forth, it's how many strokes they're over par. So the par is set for what, I don't know who really measures it, but someone measures it and goes, this is how many strokes it should take for the average golfer or player to complete all 18 holes. And then the score is based off, did the player have 2 less, which they would get a -2. So did they have 2 less strokes than the par, or did they have 4 more strokes than the par? That's a +4, and so forth. Cam Davis, although he only won by 1 stroke over second place, and I believe there's a 3-way tie for second, he won with a -18, which I'm kind of new to golf, at least watching it. To me, -18 on a par is like ridiculous. I mean, these are just all these numbers that I'm giving you in any single sport is ridiculous. And seeing -18 as the winner, as Cam Davis's winning score, is kind of ridiculous to me. But he did it. He won it. He got his second ever win in Rocket Mortgage Classic at the Detroit Golf Club. And so it was really cool. And it's actually his first win came back, I believe, in 2020 or 2021. So he's had 2 in the last 4 years, which is a really cool thing. Just want to shout him out. Obviously, he's the winner. Great job. I think he took home like $1.5 million in prize money. So he made some bank this week. He did really well. The second player I want to point out, sadly, he got cut in the second round. He didn't make the cut. But what shocked me was his age. Now, for reference, I'm 19 going on 20. This kid who ran in, his name's Miles Russell. He is a 15-year-old who made his PGA Tour debut. Now, like I just said, the golfer, I believe I just said this, the golfer that won the tournament, Cam Davis, is 29. Miles Russell is going up against people that are almost twice his age, if not a little bit more or a little bit less, and he made it to the second round. Now, I don't know if they made cuts in round 1, but still, he only had a plus, I believe it was +2 in round 1, and made it to round 2, where he got -2. So he went 2 strokes below par and made his first ever birdie in the PGA Tour. So for me, I just wanted to shout him out, because being 15 years old, going into that, having all the eyes on you, they started highlighting him on SportsCenter because he had that the birdie. They put him on in like the top 10. But still, that's just like amazing for a 15-year-old to have that much like drive and work ethic to be able to make it to a PGA Tour at that time. So I just wanted to shout that out. But like I said, sadly, he wasn't able to make it he didn't make the cut after round 2. But still, I mean, he made his debut and he got his first ever birdie at just 15. So congrats to Miles Russell. And I can't wait to see the rest of his career because he's going to be on for a while. Obviously, being 15, already making the PGA, he's going to be on for a while. So now I'm going to jump over to the NBA draft. This took place June 28th. A lot of stuff happened between June 24th and June 30th. This is exactly where it was. A lot of things started probably June 24th to June 28th. But either way, NBA draft took place. It's the first time ever the NBA has held it over 2 nights. And the first round, was the 28th. Second round was 29th. And so I'm just going to rattle off the top 5 picks like I did for the NHL. And then I'm going to go over some of my favorite picks and some of my draft winners. So I'll start off with the top 5. The Atlanta Hawks they had the number 1 pick, even though they were I think they were almost at 500 winning percentage. They were 41-41 or close to it. They ended up getting the number 1 pick. And they selected Zachary Richache. I believe I'm pronouncing his name right. He is a forward from France. I believe ESPN had him as a small forward specifically. So if you ever see a count that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's the middle person, the 3, the small forward. That's how ESPN marked them. But either way, they selected him out of France. A young, talented player, great. I think I don't know if it's a great fit, but it's a good fit for the Hawks. It's a good selection. This draft was notably weaker than previous drafts. And so I really don't think there's any wrong pick or majorly wrong pick to do because all of it is based off potential. It's based off of scheme of the team, how the player plays, and the potential that team can extend to the player, like how much that team can bring that player to his full potential. So they selected Zachary number 1. Number 2 was the Washington Wizards. This is my favorite team. I love the Wizards. Sadly, we're in a rebuild. But either way, they selected Alex Sarr, another Frenchman, who is a power forward. So he's the number 4 if you ever hear him calling 4 power forward. He's also partly a center, which is the number 5 position. So he flips between both. Very versatile between that. As a big man, I think he's 7 foot, so tall man. But they selected him number 2 overall. A lot of people kind of predicted that, especially after he refused to work out with the Atlanta Hawks. Now, he's gone on, and there's that whole fiasco of he refused, but it wasn't him. It was his agent. It's his whole thing. But either way, he got to the number 2 pick. Washington Wizards selected him. And so then we move on to number 3. Third overall was the Houston Rockets. They had the selection. They selected Reed Sheppard, the shooting guard out of Kentucky. And I think this was a great pick. One of the best shooters in the class. Really good overall pick for the Rockets. And just adds to their young core, which they had 8 players under the age of 23. So very young core there. Number 4th overall was Stephon Castle, a point guard out of UConn. He was selected by the San Antonio Spurs. Great fitting with Victor Wembanyama, their first-round pick last year. And both of them, I believe, are under 21 or 22. I think Stephon might actually be a little older than Wembanyama. I can't remember. He might be a freshman. Either way, Wembanyama is 20, so he's the age of a freshman or sophomore in college. Stephon Castle was pretty young. And so just a great pairing. One of the best perimeter defenders out there in the draft this year. So I just think it's a great pairing overall. And then finally, 5th overall, Detroit Pistons had the selection, and they ended up selecting Ron Holland II. He's a small forward out of the G League Ignite. So the NBA has their NBA league, and then they have a bunch of little affiliates. And the league right below them is called the NBA G League. And that league typically produces a lot of prospects that can be drafted. You can go in there when you're 15 or 14 or 16 or something like that. And you can work your way up and then get drafted when you're 17, 18, 19 years old. So he comes up for the 5th pick with the Detroit Pistons. A lot of people are kind of controversial about the pick because he's not going to come out and be a great shooter right away. He's going to have to work to that. And right now the Pistons need shooters, and he just doesn't fit that mold yet. Now he has the potential to, he just doesn't fit it yet. So that's the top 5. That's a recap of it. I'm going to go into my favorite picks. So I've just highlighted 3. There were a lot of picks I really liked, but I wanted to highlight these 3 specifically. For number 1, this is probably my favorite pick of the entire draft, just because the way the board fell for this team. The Los Angeles Lakers selecting Dalton Knecht in round 1 at pick 17. And I absolutely love this pick because Dalton Knecht is one of the purest shooters right now in this draft, or was in this draft. And he comes out of Tennessee. He's older, which is why he dropped so far. Because a lot of people had him going top 10, or at the very least, a lottery pick, which the lottery's capped at 14. So he's at least a top 14 pick here, and he drops all the way to 17, which is a big shocker. And it's really the way I heard it around the league was that it's only because of his age. He's 23 years old. I think maybe going on 24 pretty soon. But he's 23. He's coming out of Tennessee, one of the best shooters. I think he spent 5 years in college or something. And he drops right into the Lakers' lap. They didn't have to move for him. They didn't have to trade. And they got a shooter that can come in and contribute right away. They needed one considering they had LeBron, Anthony Davis. They needed a shooter outside that could space him out. And I think Knecht does really well with that. So one of my favorite picks of the entire draft. Plus, he's going to be learning under J.J. Redick, who is one of the better shooters of the 2010-2000 era in the NBA. And so now he's going to be learning from him as the Lakers coach. So I think that's a really good connection as well, which makes it my favorite pick of the entire draft. Going on to number 2, my second favorite pick, Rob Dillingham. So the Spurs had 2 top 8 selections. They had one at pick 4, which was Stephon Castle. They had one at pick 8, which they selected Rob Dillingham. However, they decided to trade him to the Minnesota Timberwolves for a 2030 and 2031 first-round pick. Now, the Spurs traded it. I'm not really hating it. I mean, Victor Wembanyama's 20, like I said. His prime's not going to be until about 2030 because typically an NBA player hits their prime at 27. So by Wembanyama, he'll hit his like peak prime at age 27, which would be about 2030, 2031. And now you have an extra first-round pick to add to that team. So I don't really hate it, but I do think the Timberwolves won this trade, and that's why it's one of my favorite picks. The Timberwolves needed another scorer to pair with Anthony Edwards, and there's no better pure scorer, or at least he's at least a top 2 pure scorer in this draft in Rob Dillingham. He is natural. He can do it. He can shoot. And I think he's going to be well, whether it's coming off the bench as the 6th man or if it's actually just being on the court as that second option. No matter which way it goes, it takes pressure off of Anthony Edwards, especially if Dillingham can perform right away outside the gate or right out the gate. So I really love that pick, and I really want to highlight it. That's why it's my second pick. Now, my third pick, this is for my home team, the Washington Wizards. I love this pick because of the potential and the fact that the Wizards are in a rebuild. So the potential is what they need. They need that potential. That's what all their picks were. The pick for me was their 14th pick. They had 3 first-round picks. It was their second pick in the first round, pick 14, that they got through a trade with the Portland Trailblazers before the draft. And it was for guard. They selected University of Pittsburgh University. I don't remember exactly how it goes. Pittsburgh guard Carlton Bub Carrington. He is 18. He's one of the youngest players in the entire draft. I think he's like the 5th youngest or something crazy. He's like the youngest U.S. American. He is one of the youngest players in this draft. He has a natural ability to just score, especially if he feels that potential. I mean, his first game in college was a triple-double. And if you remember what I said, a triple-double is when you have double-digit statistics, and he had it in 3 different categories. So he has the ability to score. He's also from the Baltimore area, so he comes back home, makes it a little bit more comfortable to kind of get going, kind of get in a groove with his team. And I just absolutely love the pick. He could be the guard of their future. He's 6'5". He just kind of grew into his body because I believe like 2 years ago he's like 5'11". I think it's a great pick, especially for the long run. And by the time these Wizards are like looking to start doing like a play-in, kind of fight for the play-in or fight for the in-season tournament, Carlton's going to be like 20 or 21. And so I think it's going to be a great fit for him, and that's why it makes my top 3 of favorite picks. So now I'm going to move on to the draft winners. I'll close out with this, with the NBA draft. I have 3 winners. 2 of them I already kind of talked about a little bit, but I'll just rename them. The first one's Minnesota Timberwolves. Like I said, they got Rob Dillingham. They traded up for him. They only had 1 pick in the first round. It was pick 27. But they traded for Rob Dillingham and got a really good scorer, which is exactly what they needed. And then they waited, sat there at pick 27, waited until they got another great scorer in this draft who also is pretty good on defense in Terrence Shannon Jr. He is a forward out of Illinois. I believe he's a little older. He's like 21, 22. But he's another great scorer in the forward position rather than the guard position that I think will pair really well, especially down the road with the Timberwolves. So to me, they're probably like pretty close to my clear favorite of draft winners. Like they're pretty much the winner of the draft. I think overall, just really close to it. And I just love what they did. I love how they waited. They attacked when they needed to and jumped up to get Rob Dillingham. And then they sat there and waited for a player to fall in their lap. and they got arguably two of the best scorers in the draft. And then, so my second draft winner is the Washington Wizards. They walk out with 3 first-round picks. They entered the night with 2 firsts and a second. They ended up walking out with just 3 first-round picks, but all of them in the top 24 picks. They got Alex Sarr, like I mentioned before, a really good center forward, however you want to mark him down. I think he's going to be a forward starting out. They're going to play him there because that's what he wanted to play. But really good draft potential, really good draft, at least value right now, especially for a rebuilding team. They then picked up Bob Carrington, like I talked about, a really good potential for a guard, also really young. Both of those players are 19 or younger. And then they capped it off with pick 24, and they got Keyshawn George, another great three-point shooter in this draft. And he has great potential, or I wouldn't say great. He has very good potential. And I think the ability to get him as a forward. So now you've hit a really good player that has potential for a guard, a really good player that has potential as a center or a forward or a big man, as you call it. And then now you got a really good player that has potential to be a really good forward. So I think they hit every single mark they needed to really put the foundation or build more or add to the foundation of this rebuild. And I think they did a great job and won the draft, even if it's not an immediate impact win, but I do think it's great for their future. So now heading off to my third and final winner I want to mention, it's the Utah Jazz. I have not mentioned them a lot. The Utah Jazz did really well. They didn't move much. I don't think they moved one of their picks, at least the 3 that I'm about to mention. And so they started off the night at pick 10, pick 29, and pick 32. And they ended up taking 3 of the better players in the draft at great value. Many say that each pick was a steal just because those players are valued higher. But honestly, I think it was just a great night for them. They got Cody Williams, a really good player at 10. They waited till pick 29, sat there, waited, didn't move, didn't want to lose assets, and picked up one of the better younger guards in the draft in Isaiah Collier. And he's out of USC. He's 18. He was supposed to be the other half of the duo, the dynamic duo of with Bronny James. But Bronny obviously had his issues medically and all that. However, Isaiah Collier really proved himself. A lot of people thought he was going to go top 20, top 15. Ends up sliding all the way to pick 29. And Utah is able to pick up that guard. And he's a really good two-way player, which the Utah Jazz needed a good guard that could control the game. And I think he's going to do just that in the years to come. It's going to be a little while, but I think he will grow into being just exactly what the Utah Jazz need. So Cody Williams, now Isaiah Collier, and then they wait 3 picks later at pick 32 and pick up one of the farthest fallers in the draft, Kyle Filipowski. And his reason for falling, you can go look it up. It's a lot of personal stuff. It's almost like suspicions and all that, and a lot of people were suspecting certain stuff. So you can go look it up if you want to. I'm not going to share it here just because I don't know how much is true and how much isn't. But they waited at pick 32. They picked up another great steal of the draft. And they're very similar almost to the Wizards. They got their forward who's really good with a good potential. They had their guard really good with good potential. And they got a forward center, another big man with really good potential. So honestly, I think they're the third winner, and that's exactly why. So those are my winners, my picks, my favorite picks, the top 5 picks. And I'm excited to see this season for the NBA. Summer League does begin July 12th. I think it runs July 12th to July 22nd. So it's going to be fun to watch that, see all these rookies come out, see how well they can adapt, especially in a class that's mainly on potential. They weren't very good, they weren't Victor Wembanyama's in this draft. So to see them coming out and now you just have all these players that have such high ceilings, it's going to be fun to watch. I think it's going to be fun to watch to see them go and ball out in the Summer League and just find out what's next for this future draft class. But so far, that's all for me. This video is a little longer than I expected. But I did want to give you guys just a recap of the entire week. So that's all for now. I'll see you guys next episode. And remember, this is Brian Sports Hub, your source for sports.